Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for rejoining us here at GreenTalks. We are very fortunate to have our last session for this evening. But before I say that, I'd like to remind everybody that we are recording the session and it is live streamed on YouTube. So everybody, please join me in welcoming Gary Foster.
Thank you, Allison. Can you hear that okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, and the video is good too. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that I'm speaking from the Lekwungen First Nations territory on the western shores of the country overlooking the beautiful Coast Salish Sea. The title of this session is Heal the Healers Now, TM and Resilience Training. Before I present some solutions that are field tested that have been implemented, I'd like to begin by quantifying actually how significant the problem is in Canada today. We all know the phrase, Houston, we have a problem, and Canada, we have a problem also. So let's begin. My name is Gary Foster. I'm the lead instructor of Operation Warrior Wellness in Canada. And Warrior Wellness here was founded based on the inspiration of the success of the David Lynch Foundation in New York to help first responders, healthcare workers, police, veterans, firefighters, nurses suffering the trauma of post-traumatic stress. So let's begin, and we'll go through a few slides together. We'll be joined by 4 videos, police officers speaking, some veterans, some researchers, and a nurse. And let's just have some fun with it. So to begin with, when I talk about heal the healers, we really are including nurses, doctors, police, veterans, firefighters, and paramedics. It's everyone. Even the children today are going to counselors because they're showing symptoms of post-traumatic stress that are appearing in our police and our veterans. So it's an all-pervasive problem. It's a national problem. It's not limited to these frontline emergency responders. In Canada, we spend approximately $50 billion a year on mental health care costs. 43% of new nurses are experiencing severe burnout. I heard Lisa Lapointe recently interviewed on CBC radio, and she was explaining that her coroners are reaching burnout also. And that was because of the opioid epidemic in the country. On top of that, pandemic, so COVID, incredible extra burden on the nurses, and then the heat dome. And we don't know whether the heat dome is going to come back this year or whether that's going to become an everyday part of life. The highest levels of burnout in the healthcare industry are in critical care, emergency medicine, family medicine, internal medicine. When a doctor or a nurse or a paramedic is burned out and they're tired, they naturally make more medical errors. And then there's lower patient satisfaction because they don't have the patience and the time to give to each patient that's needed because they're so exhausted themselves. And this has resulted in increased substance abuse and addiction in physicians, plus increased suicide. This is a report from the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. Up to 35% of first responders in Canada are experiencing post-traumatic stress. There's 30% higher suicide rates, higher levels of alcoholism, substance misuse, and they also have 50% higher incidences of marital problems. Jumping over to policing, $190 million was spent in 2013 coping with police health and rehabilitation. And the report found that 32% of Vancouver police officers are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress. This is significant because if 1/3 and this was the statistic I heard last week, if 1/3 of the police officers are on leave with post-traumatic stress, the other 2/3 now need to cover their shifts, which means they're working overtime. They're covering larger districts in the city or the province. And that means that they're getting more tired on top of the burnout and the post-traumatic stress that they're experiencing. So it sort of compounds. Plus, there's huge healthcare costs associated with officers who aren't working in the line of duty if they're at home, let alone the trauma that they're experiencing in their own life or their family members. Our veterans now, 24% of Canadian veterans are experiencing post-traumatic stress, and 95% of those have chronic health conditions as a result. But here's a shocking statistic. 21 US veterans commit suicide daily. Daily. More veterans die by suicide after deployment when they return home than are dying in combat. And you know, for the police department, more police die by their own gun, by suicide, than they do in the line of duty in Canada and in the US also. So what's needed? I've presented the problem in a nutshell. What's needed is a prevention-oriented resilience training program for all first responders, healthcare workers, and veterans. So now what we're going to do is take a look at an impact assessment of the application of transcendental meditation to all of these different fields. I'd like to introduce you to Constable Todd Mason here in Victoria, BC. He's actually, when this Veracity podcast was aired, he was in the line of duty. He's now off on post-traumatic leave, but his description of the opioid crisis in Canada is really, it's shocking, actually, a little bit disturbing, and it'll introduce our session and his coping mechanisms.
I'm one of those guys who I've always found in my life, I've been first to run into an emergency situation, or I'm running towards it while a lot of people are running away. When I was 14, I was actually, one of my first jobs, I was working at a restaurant as a busser and bussing tables, and I look out a window and a car got rear-ended by another car, and the car that got hit exploded and caught in the flame. First thing I did as a 14-year-old kid is I ran out the door and started pulling people out of the car. So I have a bit more of an advantage in that I have a psych degree and I have worked mental health with kids, so I have an understanding. I worked in the need crisis line when I was back in university. I've had some training in university on counseling and empathic listening and reflective listening and stuff like that. So I have that as a bit more of an advantage. Mental health seems to be on the increase, and I feel that the police are kind of the last rung on that ladder as people kind of bounce through the system and no one can really deal with people. You have a guy on the street who's in psychosis. Who do people call? They call the police to deal with it, right? Pretty much 25% of our calls have a mental health component to it. So if you look at it, it's 100 calls a day, you're looking at 25 calls a day where it has a mental health component. So those are calls where that can be anything from a suicidal person, or someone's been recalled to hospital on a mental health warrant, or a lot of the times what we get are calls of people acting oddly, or people screaming in the street, or people scaring somebody. Or if you want to talk pure dollars and cents and resources being eaten up, it's the methamphetamine. I've been saying this for years, and I've been seeing just this wave of methamphetamine coming in, and it is wreaking havoc on the city. Like I don't know how else to describe it. It's just wreaking havoc. It's chaos out there because of it. And again, going back to what I said earlier, is because we're the last rung on the ladder. These people out there who are in crisis or something's happening to them, they kind of fall down the ladder until they land into our laps, and then we're the people who are sort of relied upon to do something about it. There's nothing really after us. We're pretty much the only profession where we're hated for doing our job and we're hated for not doing our job. So it puts us in a hard spot. Unfortunately, we see things and we go to things and that not everybody can deal with, and you know, it's tough. Probably the hardest part of the job is going to someone's house, knocking on the door and sitting them down and telling them that their child's dead or passed away, or having to do that next of kin notification. That's probably, and any police officer would probably say that's probably the worst part of the job, is having to go there and tell the mother that your son has died.
What sort of coping mechanisms have you come up with? Because I can't imagine how difficult that job must be, and how difficult it must be to separate your personal life from it. Because I'm sure at some point you have to have that separation just for your mental health. So what sort of coping mechanisms or characteristics have you sort of adapted?
Me personally, I do transcendental meditation. So I do that twice a day, and it helps immensely. And it's actually really good because it's a program that our department started through our employee wellness program. We got a grant to try this out. I know Central Saanich Police did it, and they saw great success with it. So we tried it. So I was luckily one of the people who's chosen to try it out, and I absolutely love it. It's nice for a person who, I'm a very busy person. I'd like to keep busy. I don't like to sit. It's nice to have that 20 minutes or 40 minutes a day where it forces me to sit, relax my body, and just the results of that are huge. So I'm finding that I sleep better. I'm able to manage stress better. My thinking is better. I'm able to just do my job that much better. The transcendental meditation has been huge.
So thank you. I appreciate Todd Mason allowing us to use that video. It was edited down from a 1-hour video, so it's a little bit choppy. I'd like to show you some of the funding that has come in to do research on the Transcendental Meditation program. The National Institutes of Health are really one of the most conservative health organizations in the United States. And they've awarded, for 30 years in a row, they've awarded $30 million now, $1 million a year, for TM and cardiovascular research. They wouldn't continue to fund hypertension cardiovascular research if they weren't showing or finding positive results, salient benefits. The second one you see on your screen, $10 million has been awarded from the US Department of Defense for reducing PTSD through TM. We're currently in a phase 3 clinical trial after this initial study of 200 participants. And we'll talk about that in just a moment. And then here in Canada, we've been very fortunate to get 2 grants from Veterans Affairs Canada. Their initial grant in 2019 allowed us to bring the program to approximately 30 veterans and their families across the country. And the post-test after 4 months showed significant reductions in depression, anxiety. Some of the veterans had moved back home with their families. They were sleeping better. They were just coping so much better. And the results of that were significant enough that Veterans Canada renewed their grant this past year. And we're now starting, actually they've doubled the grant. We're now starting on our next phase of that implementation. What gives people a lot of confidence in the Transcendental Meditation program is a significant amount of research. Over the 50 years that research has been conducted, 380 peer-reviewed studies of TM have been published in 160 independent scientific journals. These were done at Yale, Harvard, top medical schools around the country, Stanford, UCLA. To get a study published in a journal, I'm an author myself, a published author. It's very different than getting an article published in a newspaper or magazine. It goes through a peer-reviewed process of peers in that scientific community associated with that particular area of study. It's very significant. These are some of the people you may recognize here who have come out publicly, who practice transcendental meditation themselves, have lent their name to bringing this program out to the general population. And it's a result of their support, their funding, their fundraising programs we've been doing, that we've been able to bring TM to police departments, to 43 US hospitals, University of New Brunswick School of Nursing, Vancouver Fire and Rescue. We'll talk to a lady shortly about that. Loyola Medical School, and on the list goes. So let's take a moment and look at our dear veterans, and we'll see how PTSD has traumatized their lives.
We did individual counseling, we did group counseling. I tried 5 or 6 different kinds of depression medicine. They had me try 2 or 3 different kinds of anxiety medicines. When I continued to try and things weren't helping, hopelessness really was taking over and wouldn't go away. I still continue to think almost daily that suicide was going to be the option.
It was a typical Friday. He had slammed his 6-pack very, very fast so he could sleep that night. He was self-medicating. I didn't realize till later that he took too many pills, and he couldn't speak clearly. He couldn't stand up straight.
And I put a loaded .45, my pistol, to my head in front of my wife and young daughter, and said I was going to kill myself.
And I had no idea at that time that, things are that bad emotionally for me. I thought that once we got them home, that suicide wasn't an issue.
The next day, couldn't believe that I behaved that way in front of my children, and it crushed me. I knew that I had crossed the line and I needed help. For the first time in I don't know how long, I felt hope, because I had felt so hopeless. I tried so many things that hadn't worked for me. It's helped me out tremendously with my depression and blood pressure. I don't take anxiety medicine at all anymore.
What piqued my interest in transcendental meditation was all the research that's been done and how incredibly effective it is for trauma, stress. The evidence now is that in combat stress, the trauma actually changes the brain so that this ability to self-regulate isn't there. Meditation helps with information processing, helps with self-regulation. Now here we have another tool that is fabulous and they can do for themselves.
I was interested in the TM program, but I was skeptical at the same time. The power of the TM meditation, it really came out fast, and it was surprising to me. Having that inner peace after meditation really emboldened me to deal with things that I had been just kind of stuffing away. So to be able to have relief from agitation, have relief from anger, frustration, sleeplessness, alcoholism, drug addiction, that's huge.
Meditation, and specifically transcendental meditation, I think has a role with wounded servicemen and women, because whatever stuff is happening in your life on this surface area of your life, you get under all that noise and all the storms and all the clouds, and you find that peaceful place that is the you within the you, and that's the thing you tap into.
For Norwich, we've always worried about the whole person, because in battle and in leadership positions in the United States military, you have to be a whole person. And so we've always concentrated not only making you very smart and making you very strong, making you a great leader, an ethical leader. I think that TM will provide us another whole dimension of integrating all of that, improving my performance in all of those domains. And I haven't found anything else that can do that yet. I'm a data's guy. So I was going into this skeptically. And I said, I'm all about this, about improving my students' performance that's measurable. And so we made 2 platoons, one that was trained and one that wasn't. So we had a control group. Within 3 weeks, I had the kids who hadn't been trained yelling at us, demanding that they get trained, because they were hearing from their classmates how much better they were doing. So why don't you learn a little bit about the science about this?
We expected, quite frankly, that a change in resilience would take at least a year of TM practice. Nonetheless, we saw a huge change in merely 2 months, just for the TM rooks. During the most intensive part of their training program, our rooks increased dramatically in resilience. There was no change for the control group. The TM effect, if you want to refer to it that way, is a resilience effect to the extent that negative feelings go away.
Based on that initial study, the Department of Defense was really inspired to do a more in-depth study with 200 veterans in the United States. And what they did was they chose a randomized controlled study. They randomly chose veterans to one of three programs: the TM program, health education, and prolonged exposure therapy. Prolonged exposure therapy is the gold standard for treating PTS. What happens in that situation is the individual, the patient or the veteran, is repeatedly exposed to the trauma until it doesn't bother them anymore. Sounds pretty shocking. When we gave a presentation to the police department, an officer stood up and said, "Whoa, this doesn't sound good." So in this study, what they found, which was published in Lancet Psychiatry, one of the premier journals in this field, recently, it was published last year, that the TM group was significantly non-inferior. That's the language of the researchers, but it showed significant reductions in the symptoms of post-traumatic stress compared to the other groups. Now, they all have their role, they're functioning, they're helping, but the veterans love this program because it's effortless, it's simple. The benefits come right from the start. Anyone can learn it. It's something you can do for yourself. So very significant. And this has launched a phase 3 clinical trial with 500 veterans in the program now. So let's start with a few basics. What is TM and what is it not? TM is very simple to do. It's easy, it's effortless. We teach young children, we teach people in your 90s. Doesn't matter about your trauma or your education level. It's practiced for 15 to 20 minutes, sitting comfortably in a chair, much like you are right now, I imagine. And you can do it anywhere, passenger of a train, passenger on a plane, on a car, and it's enjoyable. It's very pleasant to do. What it isn't, it's not a religion or a philosophy. You don't have to shave your head, you don't have to change your lifestyle, and there's zero concentration. This is an effortless technique, and I really mean that. It's the first thing I hear from people when they're instructed. They can't believe how simple it is, and they can't believe the level of rest they get in their very first session. So I want to show you now just a couple of research slides. I'm going to focus on this one because this was a landmark study back in 1970. A young researcher at the University of California at Los Angeles was doing his PhD dissertation, and he heard about the benefits from TM, and he wanted to measure, are there physiological changes taking place in the nervous system from the practice of TM? So what he did was they measured oxygen consumption. When your body is resting, your oxygen consumption decreases. If you're gardening, you're working out, you're busy at work, you're breathing more to bring more fuel into the system. Sitting in a chair or sleeping at night, your oxygen consumption decreases because there isn't the demand from the body. On the chart on the right-hand side, you see the darker bar. Over a period of about 5 hours of sleep, your oxygen consumption goes down about 8%. That's the level of rest you get at night. Now, in just a few minutes of practicing TM, oxygen consumption went down 16%. That's about twice as much, a much deeper, more significant level of rest. And the results of this study really caused an avalanche of research on the program, because it took it out of the field of opinion or, yes, I'm meditating, I feel better, into measurable effects in a laboratory and in clinical applications, you see changes. I want to show you this chart very briefly. It's a cross-section of our brain. At the front, on the left-hand side there, you see the prefrontal cortex. This is the CEO of the brain. This is where the higher functionings take place, like planning, structuring, organizing, memory, recall, higher organization skills. And during a stressful encounter, what happens is that blood flow increases to the amygdala. You see right at the top of the brainstem. It's about the size of 2 almonds or the size of your thumb. And that's the fight or flight response center. So in a traumatic incident, traumatic event, be it healthcare worker or police officer or veteran, blood flow increases to this area. And it's saying to the limbs, we're going into fight or flight. We're dealing with fear and anxiety. Do I get my fists up or do my feet start to run? So what happens then is under repeated trauma and events causing stress and anxiety to the individual, this center gets sort of into a hyper-excitation mode. It's like having your foot on the gas pedal and not letting it up. So our healthcare workers who are continually faced with trauma daily, paramedics, nurses, police, firefighters, any little response coming on and they overreact to it. So that moment of being able to pause and think through a situation carefully could be overshadowed by a knee-jerk reaction, and it wears out the nervous system. I'm going to play this short tape again. It's about 3 minutes long, and it's a clinical application of TM into healthcare settings. And we'll hear from some of the researchers and the doctors involved.
Welcome to our New Solutions Symposium. Today, you'll hear from expert clinical scientists from leading academic medical centers around the country about their own research and the tremendous promise of TM to improve resilience and reduce stress, and especially focused on the populations in greatest need.
Thirteen of our physicians in the Weill Cornell Emergency Medicine Department were instructed in the transcendental meditation technique. Encouraging preliminary findings showed generally moderate to large effects on emotional exhaustion, personal accomplishment, burnout scales, trauma symptom severity, and insomnia. Some gave a testimony of a transformation in their lives, reduced use of blood pressure medications, strong feedback from their family that they were a new person or a better person.
This is a pilot study where we wanted to evaluate the feasibility, acceptability, and the efficacy of TM for emergency medicine clinicians during the COVID-19 pandemic. We found that TM practice led to significant reductions in not only burnout, but also depression and anxiety, stress, and sleep disturbance.
We conclude that TM improves survey-based burnout, depression, anxiety symptoms, and sleep assessment, and show trends toward improvements in resilience and personal accomplishment skills.
We're very, very excited about the results of this study and really what it shows for this at-risk population at a time where healthcare workers are needed so desperately for our patients and our healthcare system. Transcendental meditation has been shown to decrease the activity of the mind, and it's been shown to be incredibly effective at increasing and improving the mental health outcomes, reducing burnout, emotional exhaustion, anxiety, in a variety of different healthcare populations. Finally, when we're looking at a positive change, well-being, what you're seeing here is this positive change in the TM group at 2 weeks, and this accelerates over the 3-month period.
As the physician leader of this project, I feel very positively about the impact this had in the participants and the downstream effect this had in our department and the community we serve.
We think there's an easy, safe, cheap, scalable treatment, namely transcendental meditation, TM, that can significantly improve resilience for so many of those in need.
So let's take a moment now just to show you this study. This is a meta-analysis, very significant in scientific research because it's a comparison of 146 published studies on programs to reduce trait anxiety, which is a standardized measurement in the anxiety in psychology. And the TM technique was found to be about twice as effective. And that's compared to other meditation programs, biofeedback, which was popular years ago, placebo effects, etc., and published in the Journal of Clinical Psychology in 1989. Now, cortisol, we mentioned earlier, when the amygdala is overreacting, it sends a signal down to the adrenal glands, which are sitting on top of your kidneys. And that sends out the signal to fight or flight. When it's in overuse in hyperactive mode, cortisol can be very detrimental to the body. It's the stress hormone. It's related to anxiety, depression, weight gain, headaches, insomnia, suppresses the immune system. And again, in this study, about 25 to 30% reduction in cortisol, unheard of. This is not seen in another clinical application or a clinical setting. I would like now just to shift over. We can talk to one of our nurses that learned the TM program recently, and she works in the emergency room. And I'd like you to hear what her experience is dealing with COVID and how she's coping.
There's no words to express the level of anxiety you feel in the actual workplace. Am I really safe? Not wanting to bring whatever it is that I've come in contact with into my house. I still haven't hugged or kissed my children in about a month or so. The visitor issue, that has been really tough. To only allow someone to come on in and look at their loved one through the glass. They're not even able to go in. It's tough, you know, I'm crying more, just feeling their pain. Gosh, TM has really been an anchor and a great support for me in general, but definitely with this particular situation we're in. Everything that I spoke of as far as the feeling of stress and anxiety, I don't relay that to my patients. So I'm able to take care of people that are coming in, being empathetic and comforting, just to take that 20 minutes out to just be still and meditate. It just keeps me going, and I am able to maintain inner joy that I don't know where it comes from. It has improved me, and it has shown in my work environment. So I love TM.
This is after a study on high blood pressure released, the American Heart Association, released this report saying that the TM technique was the only meditation technique that actually clinically showed to reduce high blood pressure compared to the other programs they've been trying. And it was because of this, they felt very comfortable recommending it. And I think this also lends credence to why the National Institutes of Health had funded so much research in hypertension and cardiovascular disease. People often say, well, all techniques are the same, and there's many benefits in a variety of things you can do, equine therapy or running and exercise, reading, a lot of things you can do to decompress, so to speak. TM in this study was compared with mindfulness. They're very different practices. The brainwave patterns are very different, and the level of rest is very different. So we're not monitoring feelings or what's going on in the body or what's going on in your environment. This is a very different technique, but was found to be significantly more effective in reducing trait anxiety. Also, this was another meta-analysis. Now I'd like to introduce you to a firefighter. This is Carol Messenger. She's captain in the Vancouver Fire and Rescue. Prior to learning TM, she was explaining that her levels of insomnia were really high because she was continually witnessing traumatic deaths and suffering on her calls. Her window of patience was narrowing, so she was having more knee-jerk reactions to things. And when the TM program was brought into the department where she could actually practice it, she noticed her sleep improved, she was calmer, felt a sense of well-being, clear thinking, more of a positive attitude, and more energy too. When the stress goes, it gets replaced by more energy. So here's another application of the program to another first responder. Two sort of studies I'll mention just very quickly. Decreased drug misuse and alcohol misuse, which is often a coping mechanism a lot of people use who are under continued stress and trauma with their work. And these both were meta-analysis comparing, education programs, driving under the influence programs. And again, TM was found to be significantly more effective in both of these. And we don't have to tell people when you learn the program not to partake in any of these recreational activities. They just naturally start to fall away because the body is starting to behave in a more balanced and integrated fashion, where you start making better decisions about what you're going to eat and what you expose yourself to and how well you handle trauma. This will be my last slide I'll show you. I show you this because it's very significant. This could show you the significant reductions in healthcare expenses in the country. This is a study based on statistics from Blue Cross Blue Shields in the US of 600,000 people matched to a control group of 2,000 people practicing the TM technique. And what we see here is significant reductions in hospital admissions and doctor visits in all categories of disease, 19 different categories here. And the two groups were matched for diet, age, profession, gender, education levels. They tried to match these two groups as close as they could, and they were shocked at the results. And if you're falling sick less often, look how much more you're enjoying life. Look at the reduction in the stress and anxiety on your family members. Look at the savings to the healthcare system. And a similar study was repeated in Quebec with a very significant healthcare savings. So who's going to benefit from this? Well, the insurers, for one, let alone the person who's not having to go through possibly surgery or maybe loss of life early on in life. So just to close, I think we need an action step. We're already doing a lot to bring the TM program into the Canadian Armed Forces. It's so far been accepted for veterans, but I think it's great we could have this in their basic training. We already give the armed forces and the police the best equipment, the best training, but when they come back traumatized, we really don't have tools in hand to help them. So what we need to do here in Canada is focus on large-scale research efforts. And I call on all of you, if you're working in healthcare, if you have connections to people in the fire department, the police department, paramedics, hospitals, let's start a large-scale research effort here to reduce burnout, improve the health and wellness of our First Nations, our healthcare workers, our veterans, our police, our firefighters. Let's help them strengthen their resilience. In the US, as I mentioned, that now clinical phase 3 trials going on at 9 VA hospitals with 500 veterans. It'll be the largest study ever conducted on TM meditation in veterans. And currently now we have 5,000 frontline healthcare workers at 43 hospitals who are participating in a program to reduce the impact of trauma on their life. So I think we're doing quite well on time. I'll put this slide up. I welcome everyone. Please respond. You can email me. You can visit the Canadian Women's Wellness site. And let's see what we can do to help others who are helping us. Heal those who run into danger to protect those of us who run for shelter. So thank you very much. And I think, Allison, I could turn it over to you unless there are questions.
Thank you very much for that, Gary. I'm not sure if people wanted to ask any questions. You're taking them in the Q&A?
And I don't see any coming in right there. So I think I will sign off. My contact information is there. Thank you to Peter Carr for your technical support behind the screen. Thank you very much, Allison, for all of your help. And let's move forward as Green Party members. Let's help those who are helping us. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much for that presentation. I found it really interesting. I put some comments into Rocket Chat. I mentioned that when you were talking about PE therapy, I was kind of stunned that that was acceptable. I thought that sounded awful. I had never known about that before. So thank you. That was really enlightening for me.
The gold standard, they run from it, they detest it, but it's one of the best tools they had. Now they have this tool. We've got the research behind it.
Mm-hmm. Well, so that was, if there are no questions, if nobody wants to put anything into the Q&A, that was our last presentation, and that ends Green Talks. Thank you, everybody who participated in Green Talks this weekend. It was a absolutely phenomenal experience for me. I got to meet so many different Greens and so many amazing experts in their field, so many guests. There was a wonderful talk on electoral reform, a great discussion with a lot of experts on Ukraine. There was an amazing talk yesterday afternoon, which included Elder Bill Jones and Michael Kuhn and Jenica Wayman, who are here right now, as well as Anne Mortefi, the Order of Canada recipient. There was a virtual tour of Shingwak Residential School and a mock presentation of Toastmasters. There was an amazing presentation on lifestyle medicine, as well as this morning an incredibly educational talk on AI. And I had the pleasure of leading a conversation on sex workers and COVID-19, and then ending everything off with this particular talk, which was, it was sad to hear how traumatizing some of these frontline workers, their experiences are, but also it was hopeful to hear about transcendental meditation. And it's just that just the thought of healing, and we at this party need healing. So thank you very much, everybody, for having attended. And we're going to be signing off here on Green Talks. Thank you very much for your participation. This has all been recorded, so it will be available. And it is also available on the Green Party YouTube channel. So you can watch it and rewatch it as much as you want to. So everybody, the policy side is still going. So feel free to join them if you want to. Feel free to watch the Oscars if you want to. And I wish you all a very good night. Oh, before I let you go, I am so sorry. I need to thank my team who has been with me this entire weekend one more time. They have been utterly, utterly fantastic. So I'd like to thank Nirav Chowdhury, Fred Carter, Kevin Brewer, Nancy Moniz, and Sarah Gabrielle Barron, who have been here 12 hours a day with me every single day. So thank you. And they went through training with me as well. So thank you very much to all of you for mastering this tech that we have been using to put GreenTalks together. And I wish everybody a good night. And I guess I can't wish you a good weekend because we've taken up the entire weekend. Have a good night, everybody.